recent decades, people have been putting off marriage for longer and longer. This is happening for many reasons, including economic and social. Is the institution of marriage still relevant? Do you think that society is better when most couples are married? Do you think it makes that big of a difference to the children and that are produced if their parents are married? And what about gay couples? Was the institution of marriage worth winning after all those decades of struggle? All right. Because it was Fawn's idea, we'll start with Fawn or way around. Go ahead, Fawn.
I chose this. Well, I chose this topic. I suggested this topic because I actually just saw like a random influencer that I follow, talking about it or like asking people for their opinions, like followers for their opinions. And I was like, actually, that's just, I don't know. Marriage is, I feel like a broad enough topic that people have a lot of different opinions on it. And I definitely, growing up being raised as a female, I definitely always felt the expectation that it was just normal that I would get married one day, that I would marry a man one day, and that I would have a wedding and and kids and all of those those kind of expectations. And so I always fantasized about like a wedding and what that would look like. Like even in high school, me and my friends would we had like Pinterest boards of like wedding inspiration and like all of these, like dress pictures and like, oh my God, I would want it to be like this theme and this color palette. Like it was I feel like it was more about the wedding than like actual marriage. And like you would kind of do that even without someone in mind to marry or while you're still even exploring your sexuality and stuff. But it was always assumed that it was going to be like a heterosexual marriage, a heterosexual relationship. And I think that as I learned more about feminism as I grew up and became a feminist and a leftist, I became quite jaded quite quickly with the idea of marriage, and I don't really like what marriage itself stands for, or used to stand for. I know that it has changed over the years, but I don't like the idea of like a dowry, which doesn't really happen anymore. But I don't like that kind of that you sell your daughter, and I still don't like the tradition of being given away like by the father. I think that it gives me the ick. It's so antiquated, and my parents are very conservative Christians, by the way. So they have full expectations for me to get married, have a wedding, and do all of that stuff, and get married possibly even in a church. And if I said to them, I don't want dad to give me away because I'm not fucking property, they would probably be quite offended at that. And they would probably and I don't actually think that I want to get married. I've already disappointed them by telling them that I don't want children. But I think that it would absolutely break them if I was like, I don't think marriage is necessary. That's basically what it comes down to. I'm sorry, I have so many thoughts on this, but I don't think that it's necessary. And I think that it's nice if you want to do it, but I don't see any point to it other than, I don't know, maybe some like social security benefits or something from the government, maybe, but you kind of get that after a while anyways. I don't know. I think that if you want to be with someone forever, you can just do that. And you don't need to spend a whole lot of money, and you don't need to get the government involved.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sorry, this rambling.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Hey, and we have time. We have time for the ramble, honestly. So thank you so much. We're gonna go counterclockwise, so we'll go to Spoon next. Spoon.
Yeah. So I agree with a lot of what Fawn is saying about how we're very much socialized into this institution of marriage. Like little girls are taught like, oh, you'll have a husband, you'll have kids, and blah blah blah. It's not like necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily a good thing either, right? Like this, like having a child, having a family, right? It's not like a bad thing, right? It's not. The issue with this is that we encourage people to do this and not other things. It's like you should follow this pathway. If you're not following this pathway, there's something wrong with you. There's something terrible about this. And like historically, again, this speaks broadly to marriage. It's been used to subjugate women. Like you said, women are given away like property. Women are obviously bought with like dowries and stuff like that. And like arranged marriages, not always, but tend to be in favor of the man. And like the broader family, which would be headed by a man, historically speaking. However, I'm a bit traditional in this sense. So there are actually a lot of benefits to this. I think maybe a bit of a spicy take, but I am. But we are like a pair bonded species, right? It does seem to be that we do better in pairs, right? There's this whole argument about like it takes a village and like communal raising and stuff like that. At least from the study I've seen, it does seem to be that 2-parent households, and not more and not less, tend to be the most productive and the most beneficial for children. And there is benefits to that. For example, like being in a marriage, being with one partner does seem to be beneficial, not just in terms of like the social aspect of it, but in terms of like specifically how we raise children and how we go on with our lives. Like, for example, if you're married, you're more likely to live longer. You're more likely to be financially stable. Your children are more likely to be like healthy and happy. However, Fawn again makes a very good point. You don't necessarily need to be married to do any of this. You can just be with your partner. And it is kind of odd. It does seem kind of odd to me that the state specifically encourages a religious convent to sanctify this. It is odd. And I'm 20. I'll be 26 in like a month or so, right? So like this kind of thing is like coming up to my horizon. I'm not going to get married anytime soon. Yeah, I'm not going to get married anytime soon, but. This is sort of coming onto my horizon, right? Again, like socially, when you get to about 30, you're expected to be like settling down, right? And I've talked to my girlfriend about this, and it seems like we don't really care about getting married. Like being together is the point of being together, right? It's not about having it sanctified by any institution. It's about being with that person. However, there are some great benefits to getting married, like tax breaks and like healthcare, like shared between them, like dual citizenship. My girlfriend's not from England. I could become a citizen in somewhere else, and she could become a citizen here. There are some fantastic benefits to that. However, I've looked into this, and basically all of these benefits apply for a civil partnership as well, and it's a completely secular arrangement, which then begs the question: should the state be incentivizing this? Well, yeah, it does seem to be they should be incentivizing that we get together and we have kids. It does actually seem to be beneficial for us and our offspring. So as much as I don't actually like the institution of marriage and this very outdated religious belief and this patriarchal aspect of it, the actual outcomes of marriage, when done properly, or not necessarily marriage, but monogamy, do seem to be something that we should encourage and that we should have. But it's not necessarily for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Nathan.
Yeah, so for me, I think the most important aspect of a marriage is the happiness of the two individuals. So, I mean, if someone doesn't want to go through that process, that's completely fine, or you know what? Sometimes it's not even just two individuals, right? Could be 3, 4, whoever. As long as they're happy, that's the most important thing to me. For me personally, I would say I want to get married the sort of, I guess, what we perceive as normal. Not in like a weird like property way, but I just want to have the Mr. and Mrs. eventually, you know what I'm saying? I'm just chill that way, I guess. But I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, all that matters to me is the happiness of who I'm with and myself. And if we want to get married in the regular way, we're gonna do that. And I encourage everyone to do things based on what they feel is correctly. Now, when I try to think of like the bigger picture of like the state involvement, the country, and all that stuff, I've seen a lot of individuals really emphasize like, oh my god, society's falling apart, we have such a big divorce rate and all that shit. They're saying like society is dependent on marriage. I find that silly, and I think we would see marriage rates go up and more stable marriages if people were not stressed out by finances. And when we have a situation where 50% of the people make $35,000 or less, yeah, people are going to not stay married and have unstable relationships. So, I mean, for the people that really care about the institution of marriage, I would encourage focusing on economic and social change if you want to see that. But otherwise, focus on what makes you happy.
Thank you. Thank you. Biggs.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So, I personally am actually against the institution of marriage overall. I think a lot of these things should just be between the people. But I also think that one of the things that we kind of gets missed by this push for marriage in general is that I think it should be more towards finding somebody that you can be with to help be more beneficial to each other. I very much believe that a relationship should be something where the two parts make a greater whole. Now, I don't necessarily think marriage is required for that, but there's a lot of practical things you can take too. So, like for me, I'm married. I don't know if T-Jump is married, but everybody else here appears not to be married. I went through the marriage because my wife is religious, her family's religious, and I felt that it was the proper thing to do. But I do think that the civil union stuff is very important. Like Spoon had said, there's a lot of benefits you get from that. There's a lot of safety nets you get because of that. There's a lot more rights you get to the being able to spend time with your loved ones, especially if there's something that's like an illness. Same thing like with Spoon said with insurances and things like that. But what I would say, my best advice to the young people out there is try to find somebody that you can spend time with and be comfortable with to help split like the cost of living and things like that. It doesn't even have to necessarily be like a romantic relationship either. Just having somebody that you can count on, maybe like a best friend, because when you think about it, especially like with the struggles that are going on right now with like rent being so high and all these things, like basically when you bring another person in with you, not only do you double the income, but you have the cost. And I know that's not like a direct correlation. It's, there's a little bit of fluctuation there because obviously more food, more utilities, all that. But I think people should take longer time to find out who they're connecting with. And then if they want to get married, they can. But I don't think it's something we should be forcing people to do because it's just like expected. Because I think that's kind of, it's one thing to like appease your family and stuff like that. Because I did that, and I love my wife, and I'm so thankful that we did. But I think that it's something that people just should choose to do on their own. It shouldn't be expectations. I don't think you should let your family or anybody else pressure you into these situations. As far as it goes with some of the other points in the question, I don't know if you wanted to get like the full topics or just kind of like break it down. But as far as like same-sex couples, to me, I think that same-sex couples should be allowed to adopt and to have children however they decide to do it. The one caveat I do have to that is if you are in a same-sex marriage and you have a child, I think should be more. You should have a more expectation to have whatever the opposite sex is, some type of role model to fill the gap, because I think that there is something that can be beneficial to having, a man or a woman in those respects. I think it can be beneficial, but I don't think it's necessarily required. But I think that having like a lot of my friends that are in same-sex marriages, they had like uncles and aunts and things like that they had other role models to fill those gaps. But again, I think it's all things equal. I think it's perfectly reasonable, and I think just as long as people are happy, they should pretty much be able to do whatever they want.
Thank you. T-Jump.
So my position is looking at all the papers and data on the topic. There's a clear indication that marriage has a positive impact in lowering poverty, lowering crime rates, improving child's outcomes. We know that for whatever reason, marriage as an institution is very successful in human interactions, which is why the government gives tax breaks for it. It produces a better society overall. And it's not to say that it can't be done without marriage, it's just harder. For more people, this kind of arrangement seems to produce better effects on average at a much higher rate than average, which is why governments promote it. And the facts bear that out. And so because the facts bear that out, it is obviously a good policy that we should try to encourage, obviously not enforce or try to force people into it. If you don't want to be married, then don't. Perfectly fine. But because it does have a demonstrable positive impact on society, promoting it and supporting it is definitely a good thing. Like training for any kind of a sport. If we know that doing this activity makes you better at the sport, then we should absolutely promote that activity because it makes you better able to fulfill your life goals. And we know that marriage is one of those things, one of the best indicators of successful lives, that you won't be in poverty, that you won't commit crimes, that you will have a relatively successful life. And so we should definitely promote it as a means to fulfilling your life goals because it's demonstrated to be such a thing.
Thank you. Okay, open to the panel.
So I did want to bring up something that I forgot to mention too. Is one of the things where I think that marriage has kind of, in general, failed. When you look at the statistics, like G-Jump brought up, you find that over 50% of marriages do end in divorce, and I think that there's
Yeah.
a lot of. I mean, obviously, we know that there's effects on children and things like that, but I think we fail to realize the effects that it has on the actual people in that relationship. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think that if we're already at a 50% failure rate, is that 50% that maybe they could have been better off had they not got married. Now I know there's still like relationship problems and things like that, but when you add marriage and all the legalese type things,
The
it
legal
gets
stuff and the financial
exactly.
And
stuff.
I think like a very important distinction to make here is it's not marriage specifically, like the institute, like the Christian institution of marriage or whatever institution of marriage you ascribe to. It's having a partner, right? Having
Yeah.
somebody who you can economically depend on, having someone you can socially depend on. It's not marriage itself, it's partnership.
And
And-
I don't think that needs to be romantic either. I thought that like Biggs, that was a really good point, because that honestly, I know this is like personal and anecdotal, but that's that's what I'm bringing here. Is my actual hold on. My thing is like I want to be I don't see myself being in a marriage, but I see myself being in a long-term partnership with my best friend. That is kind of the life that I see myself living, is that with my best friend, who's been my best friend since we were 5 years old. We have very similar ideals and very similar kind of life goals, and I see me and her living together for as long as as long as we need to, and as long as we want to financially support each other and make a good stable partnership, because it's hard to do it by yourself.
Yeah, I think the only issue with that is like child rearing, right? Like unless you want to like
Well,
raise
we
a
don't
child
want
with your best friend.
want
Well, there you
children,
go, right?
but
You don't want to raise a
but
child,
yeah, there would obviously be differences if
Yeah.
one of us had wanted children.
Yeah, I think everybody's getting at the same kind of message of like, obviously you should just do whatever makes you happy, right? But this sort of opens up this broader question of, should we be incentivizing people to behave like this? Should society be structured around that we should like be together, right? Because the issue is not that we encourage people to be together, but by encouraging people to be together, we discourage people from being
I would
alone.
say when we like look at from the policy perspective, right? It would it would be nice if at an economic level, forget like the whole social aspect of it, if we could get to a point where one person in a household could like pay for everything. That's not saying that I want to go back to traditional roles or go back to tradition or anything like that. But like, I mean, what I think when we think of the reasons why many marriages don't work is because of things like economics. Is because people are poor, and money is a cause of stress, and stress is a cause of divorce. So
Yeah.
for the people that really care about like marriage and really want to see it happen and really want to see it still exist, what I would suggest to them is to make sure people have economic opportunity, to make sure you can have people living less stressful lives, and we need to raise wages. But at the end of the day, well, the reason why I kind of like that on like a policy perspective, because it will make people happier, not because I'm trying to protect some old institution, you know?
No, I think there's definitely an argument to be made of like when marriage was just absolutely the norm. Everyone got married, like the kind of original idea of marriage was that one person would stay at home and take care of the house and take care of the children. That was a full-time job. And the other person was the breadwinner, and they could survive like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mhm.
in this modern society, you just can't. And that
Yeah.
puts a lot of strain on relationships. And that doesn't mean that, oh, we have to go back to that. But it's like, yeah, what incentive for this extremely expensive institution of actually getting married, having a wedding, if you really want to go out, have a honeymoon, and then what if you get divorced? What if there's kids involved? What if you need to pay child support and you're back on single income, but you have kids to take care of? It's just it doesn't make sense to me in this. It's not financially viable, and I would like to see it be more financially viable. Honestly, I think that people should be incentivized to do it. I just don't see that incentive, so I'm not interested. Do you know what I mean?
So
Yeah, this is
Mhm,
this is like very specific to like marriage, is in like the marriage under the church, right? Like, so for example, in England, the marriage license is about £2,000. A civil partnership is 50 quid. It's 50 pounds.
What?
Yeah, it's like it's
That's
same benefits. Everything
huge.
is the same. It's like literally like what is that, 40 times cheaper? It's ridiculous.
The same in
Um,
America too.
Yeah, a civil partnership offers all the same benefits, right? But yet we don't see many people getting a civil partnership. We see lots of people getting married, right? That's because we have this like social aspect around getting married.
Yeah.
Like marriage is more than just being with somebody, right? Marriage is more like making a declaration that this relationship is like committed, or this relationship is going to work, or something like that. It's not just about obviously all these benefits and everything like that. There is like a huge amount of social standing to do with getting a
Yeah.
marriage. Like, for example, like Big said, like he's very happy that he got married, right? Right. It's not about, and I understand again, it's about being with that person, but it's still seen as a declaration. You still have to make that, and it validates your relationship in that sense, which again, I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing that you need your
Mm.
relationship validated, or you should be sort of expositionist in that sense.
Well, it's socially pressured.
Yeah.
Being like, when are you guys going to get married? You've been together for X amount of years. When are you going to get married? And it's like, well, it doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to push back on a few things. One, the divorce rate thing. So that's like an often quoted statistic, but it's not actually quite right. The divorce rate is actually really hard to pin down. It's actually not a straightforward thing to do, for various reasons, right? Part of it is just like reporting, that not all states report it, and then report it in different ways, right? The latest statistics from the CDC was that 14.9 people out of every 1,000 will get divorced, right? And that it's the lowest number since the 14.9 divorces per 1,000 marriages, excuse me. And it's the lowest number since 1970. But yeah, this is like not an easy thing to do. Like in that original number, that 50% seems to have been flawed in its origin. So and I think at some point we did hit a high. But like it was kind of a sensationalist thing. So we were like, oh, half of marriages are ending in divorce, and people just kind of ran with that. And anytime you have a statistic that's a round number, you should always be a little,
sus.
yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for
Sus.
fact checking that.
Yeah.
Thank you, because I hear that number being thrown around all the time.
Everyone does. Yeah, everyone throws that number around. So I don't blame. I did the same thing. So yeah, until I heard at some point in the past that it's not quite the case. But yeah, it's actually, to figure out the exact number is actually quite difficult. But still,
Did you say these were marriages in America? Or did you just say
this
across
is
the world?
Marriages in America. I'll try to get you this. It's on my phone. I'll get you this site though. So you can see this article. This article like goes into detail as to why it's complicated. So it's from 2018. But anyway, I'll send you to you. But it's from America. So there's that. And I think it's interesting, how marriage has shifted in the minds of individuals, right? Like culturally, especially people are around our age. So like Spoon saying that he's going to be 26 soon, and people around my age don't have to think about this, right? Like, obviously.
What age is that?
Oh, I mean, no, his age. Sorry.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
like my
yeah.
age. I did that very confusingly. I'm sorry. I switched perspectives there. But like people around his age aren't expected to be married. But like it kind of was that before, right? So again, we're pushing this off decades,
yeah.
right? My parents. Okay, so I'm talking about me. My parents were married. I think either around Spoon's age or slightly younger, right? And I think it's the case for many people of that generation. My parents are boomers, right? So I think there's many people of that generation that you would just be married within your early 20s. And so I think I'm trying to like figure out like what are the reasons why people are pushing this off, right? So there's multiple questions. One, there's pushing it off because you still want to, but you're saying that this comes later in life, and then there's not wanting to at all. So let's try to break it up and tackle it piece by piece. So let's talk about pushing it off. But Spoon, you want to say something?
I think like two big reasons I can think of straight away. One, financially. Like I said, marriages are fucking expensive, right? Just marriage license itself is expensive. Weddings are expensive. Honeymoons are expensive. Rings are expensive. It's just very expensive, right? And we see people are just fucking poor. It's, like I don't have as much wealth now as my parents did at my age, right? People are just poorer now. It's just generationally that's what's happening. Secondly, as well, we are exposed to so many more people nowadays. And we see our options as a lot broader. Knowing that you have to like settle for one person is not a thing anymore. You're not just dating the people in your village or the people in your local pub or whatever, right? I can literally speak to anyone in the fucking world, right? If you got access to the internet, bam, I could fall in love with you, right? It's possible. And sort of psychologically, you've got this sort of like fear of missing out, right? FOMO. If it's like 10 people and you get the one that you want, brilliant, right? You know you've got your options, you get the option you wanted. But now it's not really the case, is it? There's millions of people that you could meet, millions of people you could fall in love with, and people see this, especially like pushed in the media now. We've got like the sort of like the player kind of thing. You can do anything, you can go anywhere, you can be with anyone. And I think this pushes us away from sort of monogamy. And it, again, going back to like the social aspect of this, I think people are very disenfranchised nowadays, and they don't want to bring children into this world. They don't want to settle down. They don't want to sort of like get into a grind, if you will. And I think those are probably the three biggest reasons people are putting it off.
People want to live first. People want to have careers. They want to travel. Well, not right now, but they did.
Like living is like that. What was considered living like 30 years ago is entirely different nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Like living 30 years ago was like, I don't know, maybe on holiday once a year. Living nowadays is like, oh yeah, I want to fucking like go traveling for 2 years, and I want to fucking like see this person and go to that person and work here and then do that because we're aware of all these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm 26. By my age, my mom was married and had a fucking 3-year-old. Like, and that just sounds like an absolute nightmare to me.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like her conception of what like a good life was probably consisted of that, right? That's what like she thought happiness was. Like some interesting stats are like, so like divorce is like specifically like a Western thing. Right, because we're like more progressive in terms of like being against the patriarchy and stuff like that. So like getting divorced isn't seen as so like unbelievable. Whereas like in countries where they have like arranged marriages or like more sort of stereotypical gender roles and stuff like that, they're much more like to stay in these relationships because their conception of what being happy is being in a marriage, is having a marriage that even though it might make them unhappy, is what they consider to be like happy in context of their society, which again doesn't really speak to marriage as an institution, but rather the metric we should be using here is individual happiness, and then furthermore how they are quantifying their happiness and what kind of society and what kind of happiness you want out of society.
Yeah.
You know,
also,
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that also there's an argument to be made that possibly the reason why divorce rates have gone up is also because women have more freedom, like
Autonomy,
women
yeah.
autonomy, that's the word I was looking for, sorry, my brain. Women can say, actually, this is really shit for me, and it's no longer just a man's decision.
Yeah. They're not so financially dependent. They can just go, I have a job, I have income, I'm gonna leave. Fuck this. I don't have to like sit here and take care of your kids.
Yeah. So far, listening to this discussion, I'm assuming I'm the youngest here. I tend to be like one of the younger people on Prime's panels. I feel like
Don't
I have
call me
like
old.
I don't know. I feel like I everyone on this panel radiates millennial energy to me. Okay.
Are you a Zoomer?
Actually,
Yeah.
I'm technically a Zoomer. Okay, I'm post 95. Technically a Zoomer.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're a Zoomer then. You're part of the club.
Zoomer
But
gang.
yeah, I feel like again, I'm not like a trad this, trad that, but like I feel like I have sort of the most the most old school kind of perspective on this out of everyone here. Like for me in my life, what I want to do is marry the person I dated in high school, live our lives in our 20s, and then my mom had me when she was 30. I think that's a comfortable age to have a kid. I wouldn't mind having a kid at that point in time. Now, this is just what I want. This isn't like a plan or anything. There's no way I can guarantee all this stuff happening. But I mean, I think it's cool though that that everybody here almost has like a different perspective and understands what they want to see, and that's exactly the situation, because we should be striving for, once again, what makes us the most happy.
Well, this is why I say like
Biggs,
it's
are you trying to
important
say
here.
something? If you are, muted.
I think he's just talking to his stream.
Oh.
Yeah, I think he's talking to a stream. I got confused by that too. I was hoping I wasn't interrupting.
Okay, no, that's my fault. Spoon.
So this is why I say like it's important that we understand how we measure happiness in context, right? And this actually comes to like an interesting thought experiment called the original position, right? So obviously you can't conceptualize of happiness for everyone. There's no fitting definition of happiness for everyone, right? Happiness is very dependent on the individual, right? And obviously, since happiness is dependent on the individual, you shouldn't really be sculpting society in any specific way.
Absolutely.
I do think that there's.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say. I when it comes to like policy, this for me, if I was like doing policy, like I mentioned earlier, I want to see wages rise in general. That might result in something like marriages being more stable or going up or whatever, just because there would be less stress and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I guess that would just be a way to see where we are when it comes to those other policies, and not really the end goal is to strengthen marriage or anything like that. But I don't know. Since we were talking about like society and stuff, I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I'd actually disagree with Spoon there a little bit. So I think that if we can find certain patterns in society that lead to more successful groups of people who are like less in poverty, less crime, those kinds of things, if those activities are demonstrably better, then I think it's a good idea to promote those. Obviously not require them, but to incentivize them, to try and get people to do them more often, to teach people about them. Yeah. Like if there is something that demonstrably works, then we should definitely promote that in society.
Do you think we should give like more? But I think that a lot of the time we were advocating for even more incentives to make sure that it was stable. Do you think that there are enough like incentives for marriage, or do you think that they should be given more by like the government and stuff?
I have no idea about the more. I just think that we should encourage it and teach people about it. So I think instead of incentives, more
do you not
about
think
education.
It's being pushed enough?
I have no idea. I don't know what the correct amount is.
If I could hop in there real quick, a thing that can be done. This isn't really a marriage thing, but just like to make relationships and families more stable. Something like child tax credits are a really good idea in my opinion. So like that's coming with like the stimulus. I really fuck with that, because it makes more stable and happy lives. So yeah, that's what I gotta say there.
That was a response to Spoon, so let Spoon go, and then we'll go to Biggs.
Yeah, so my issue with this is not that we shouldn't be encouraging it. It's that whenever we encourage something, like especially in this binary state, get married or don't get married, you're discouraging something else, right? So by encouraging people to get married, by encouraging what we consider to be a positive behavior, you're discouraging the other thing and branding it as not necessarily a negative behavior, but like an undesirable behavior, a behavior that produces like not good outcomes, right, or worse outcomes overall. And we do this, and we fall into the pitfalls of like where marriage like trips up, right? You get like people into a marriage and they feel as if they're trapped in that marriage and they should stay in that marriage because it's the socially acceptable thing to do. It's the best for society, and then they're unhappy, and they get all these bad outcomes for society. You get like domestic abuse, and you get unfulfilled people raising unfulfilled children.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of what you said there, Spoon. But one thing I think I would rather see, especially with people pushing back, like we said, with the, at what age they get married and move on with those, like that step in life. But I would be more satisfied if there was more things for like benefits like cohabitation. I think not only does it help with, like I said earlier, about like the costs and the income, but also I think it also helps the environment, because if we have more people like living together, there might be less need for like cars. They can live together, share cars. There's less need to like have like even more housing and stuff like that. Like I know there's some other like pitfalls to that as well. Like I'm not a huge fan of like big cities and like tight dense populations, but I think that like cohabitating with like one person that you're really comfortable with, I think definitely benefits society a lot. But one of the things I kind of want to one of the things I wanted to bring up too is I think that a lot of people think that like marriage necessitates this like strong family unit, but I think it's like we can still have that strong cohesive family unit without necessarily having marriage, because like you said, I think Spoon was saying about the declaration thing, like we can declare something, but like if we just do it, like there's no need to declare it, you know what I mean? And I think we can still have these family units. And I know that's one of the big things that like the right pushes against, is that they think that if we get rid of marriage, like everything's going to fall apart. People are going to be like, just doing, naughty things with everybody, all the neighbor, it's going to be like this like hedonism like type situation. But I think that's like just completely false, because like you guys mentioned earlier, people have the social need to bond with another. Now, some people, may find that they may want to bond with more than, one person, and that, as long as they're being safe and everybody's being respectful, that's fine and it's consensual. But I just think that like, if we can just incentivize this like cohabitation, these like things that we can improve, not only the people's like individual lives, but we can also improve just like the environment and just like things like that as well.
I was actually thinking about this earlier, right? And it seems that actually in basically all cases, except for raising a child, which actually is encompassed in this in a different way, polyamory or like being in like open relationships is actually better. Sorry, I don't know if my mic keeps jumping. It's actually better. Like for example, living in like a house with like one other person is good, right? You split the bills with them, and you may share a car or whatever. But actually doing it with like 5 people, that's even better. Splitting the bills 5 ways, right? You got 4 other people to support you, and you got 4 other people to like lend you their stuff.
I think that runs into other issues though, like that. There,
yeah,
you get a lot more. Like
you get stuff with like jealousy and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But, again, this is really like speculating on what human nature is, and like how much of this is nature and how much of this is nurture. Are we jealous naturally? Is it like a natural thing?
I would say probably yes, but I mean,
I think
as a result of like us enforcing monogamy. I mean, that's what I mean. Is it as a result of us enforcing monogamy? Because I think all of us have agreed here that there has been a precedent that we do enforce people just to get together and stay together, and like that should be your wife, and your wife should not cheat on you, and your husband should not cheat on you, and they shouldn't be with anyone else. So there's definitely a large precedent there to say that jealousy is something that we teach. It's not necessarily inherent. And again, the flip side of this is there are people who are polyamorous. There are people in open relationships and they're not jealous. So it's
we also see this in the animal
something
kingdom, though,
innate to everyone, or maybe it's not innate.
We see jealousy even when they aren't monogamous.
So let's go to Fawn and then Nathan.
First of all, I just want to say I believe that polyamorous, like people being polyamorous, that's like, to me, that's more of a like a sexuality kind of, and that not everyone can do that, but a lot of like there are a lot of people that that's just how they are made. That like that's just they don't feel those jealous feelings because they're comfortable in knowing how their relationship works. Like and they have the boundaries of like what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in their relationships. And I think it's a lot about open communication. I think where jealousy seeps in can be when people are just lying about their feelings or about how they're involved with other people. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but that's just what I've observed from my friends who are in polyamorous relationships. And I just want to say, if marriage is the norm, like a monogamous marriage, heterosexual marriage is the norm. That is already what is being promoted, what is being taught to people in social aspects of society all over the world. That is totally the norm. And I think that it is important, like while that is a good thing and that can obviously be beneficial, I think that it's also important to destigmatize other forms of relationships, whether it is a bunch of people living together in one place, whether they're romantically involved or not. Like I think that it can be looked down on. Like if you're living with 5 people because it's just easier on your bills, that is not seen as like a permanent solution. It's like, oh, okay, well, you're doing it because you're young, and then when you grow up, then eventually you'll go off and live in your little family, like
Yeah.
family unit, like that's not the end goal. But what if it is? There's nothing wrong with that being the end goal.
Yeah.
If you want to just keep on making life a little bit easier for yourselves financially, and maybe it's more enjoyable to have a more social kind of lifestyle.
It seems like immature though, isn't it? If you do that, if
Yeah,
like
it is.
I'm just gonna live with like my 5 mates, we're just gonna like share a house forever. That
Yeah.
seems like immature. That seems like not
As like
grown up or like
student
yeah.
living. It's like, no, but what if we just keep on doing it? I think more and more
like you said, why
people,
is this?
yeah,
Yeah.
more and more people are doing that for longer. But again, it's still not seen as the end goal for like how people should live. And I think that is important, I think, to make alternative living situations not frowned upon, and not make people feel pressured to find the one person, because
Yeah,
we
and
see it
this
all
is
the
what I was
time.
saying. This is what I
Yeah, we
say about
see.
like when you encourage marriage, right? Fucking like it. That's what I said. Like when you encourage marriage, you discourage this other
Yeah.
thing, right? It's like I said, it seems as mature or whatever. But like, why is this not viable? Like,
Yeah.
I actually think it would be great. I think I'd probably like really like living with all my friends and like like even like my girlfriend as well. Like, why not? Right? I like these people.
Yeah.
I choose to be friends with them. Like,
Why not
seems
live
like
with
pretty.
why not live with you and your girlfriend and your best friend and their
Yeah.
partner as well? And like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean,
I'll be
you might want to
honest.
like
I don't want to live.
some space.
Yeah, I don't want to live with my friends because I don't want to shit in the same toilet that they do. But
Well, that sounds like you just need better friends.
Yeah.
Better dietary.
Yeah,
Clean friends. How about that? You could have your own ensuites. Come on. Like that's the thing. You could afford that.
compatible
I'd like
Live with a bunch of friends.
with compatible.
I'd like to disagree with Spoon again, if possible. So he said that if you promote one thing, you're like denouncing another thing, and that's just not true. Like you can promote one thing while not promoting something else, but that's not a denouncement. Like for example, there are benefits for single motherhoods and for married couples. The fact that you give money to one doesn't mean you can't give money to another or give benefits to another. So just promoting one doesn't necessarily denounce another, even though some people in society will see it that way. So I don't see this connection that I've heard from a few people that I've talked to, that they see that promoting one inherently is denouncing the other. I don't think that follows at all.
But it is socially. Like it might not be legally or anything. Like obviously people who have civil unions, that is obviously gives the same benefits. But on a societal level, we still put marriage on this pedestal.
Yeah, so it's like a
Was
it's a
that
binary.
because of the benefits, or is that
So-
just because of something socially completely separate?
It's a little bit of both, right? So like this is a binary state, right? You're either into marriage or you're not into marriage, right? And like we as a society think you should be into marriage. Right?
I'm
That's
sorry, I
what we
wasn't
think.
laughing at you. I
So
was
it's not
laughing at something
necessarily
else. My bad.
I know my internet keeps cutting out anyway. So it's not necessarily that like not being into marriage is a bad thing, right? But like clearly it's not the preferable alternative, right? If you've got two choices, one isn't necessarily the bad choice and one isn't necessarily the good choice. It's just the preferable alternative.
Well, I still don't see the connection here. Like the government promotes you should get a Roth IRA or a 401k. Some people don't, and it's not like socially stigmatized. It seems like all of the social stigmatization comes from more like a religious background. It doesn't have anything to do with the political promoting of something that could benefit people. So I don't see
I'm
a
not
connection between
saying
those
that
two.
it shouldn't be promoted. I'm just saying that it I don't know how to fix it, but it would be good if other things were also promoted alongside. Like, oh, I just saw in chat is that, you know, parents talk to their children about getting married someday and they don't talk to them about having a civil union or other kinds of relationships. And obviously that's a social thing. That's not anything to do with the government. I don't necessarily think the government should try and get involved in that or whatever, but that it is like a social issue.
Well, why is that a
You-
problem? Like, shouldn't your
you-
parents teach your kids the most successful method? Like, this is the one that has all of the papers supporting it. I don't see any papers supporting polyamorous relationships as decreasing crime or decreasing poverty or increasing the health of children. So doesn't it make sense for parents to say, well, here's the one that has all the data. We should teach our kids this one.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but
it's more like that those kind of relationships haven't been around long enough, I think, to have any kind of hard data on them. Do you know what I mean?
Actually, there is.
Not really.
Yeah, there is. Have you heard of this like it takes a village kind of aspect, right? Like this idea that like we're actually like raising communally and like communal sort of like living was just like that was just how it was for like fucking ages, right? Like back like in the primordial era up until like the 1700s, like you'd just be raised communally and everybody would raise communally. Like, there was still like monogamous relationships there, but like communal raising, like communal living, were just incredibly common. And
that
like
also
that
was a time when you were so much more reliant in general for everything on your neighbors too.
Yeah, but that's what I mean, right? So like this is the point, right? So we're like sort of breaking down these barriers, right? Obviously, we used to live in like fucking like monkey tribes, right? And it was necessary to live in a monkey tribe because you couldn't survive on your own, right? And now and then it was necessary to live in like a fucking little commune, right? Because you're reliant on your neighbors to survive. And now it's necessary to have a partner because again, you need your partner to like survive. And we'll break that down, right? As these sort of barriers get lowered and as like being independent becomes more viable, it's not necessitated so much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree. I would go back to what Nathan said earlier. Like if we could just solve all income problems and one person could support their whole family on their own, then this wouldn't be an issue. But I think that in today's society, we are at the point where having two people in a family is still beneficial or necessary enough to be sufficiently beneficial, and so we should promote it. But obviously, once we get to the point where we have solved like Star Trek levels of income, or no one even gets paid, you just get what you need, then yeah, it's going to be completely pointless to have marriage.
Well, I don't know, right? Because like I think this presents a dichotomy of like you either promote that people just be together because that's good for them, or you promote that we fix the issue that is making people have to be together, and that way the people who don't actually want to like pursue that kind of life don't have to. The people that do want to pursue that kind of life can.
I'm not sure what you mean. So again, I would say that if there's one method that's been proven to work and has the highest level of success, that's the one we should promote, like without any debate. Like, go with that one.
But you understand that that only exists within the current framework of our society, right? So surely we should maximize our potential to do things by expanding society rather than saying, actually, this works in current society, so let's promote that, right? Our viewpoint should not be, let's promote monogamy in marriage. Our viewpoint should be, let's promote people being happy via whatever that means, not necessarily marriage, right? Even though that might work currently.
I'm not sure. I don't think I would agree there. So I'd say that if we have something in the past that we know works, like science, it's how science works, and then you come up with a new model that hasn't been tested yet. I mean, obviously we want to test the model, but we wouldn't promote the model before it's been tested. We would promote the thing that's been tested and shown to work in the past.
I'm not
first,
proposing
What is your
not-
idea of promoting though? Like, do you mean being
I'm
pushed
not-
by like the government or
I'm
like?
not
Incentives,
proposing a model
education,
though.
what we
I'm
do now.
proposing like an entire paradigm, right? So I'm not saying like, this works within the current framework of society. I'm saying change the entire framework of society, right? So I'm not proposing like a simple shift in the way we think about things. I'm proposing like an entire shift away from how we conceive of things in general.
And you think that's safer than promoting something we know that works and keeps people alive for
I don't
thousands of
necessarily.
years?
I'm not really concerned about it being like safer. I'm concerned about like what's best for humanity, right? Obviously, we don't have to do this by like going around and like cutting wedding rings off people's fingers. But
Yeah, like you
like,
can
No,
promote both.
So by safer, what I mean is that there's certain policies that we know promote things like lower crime, lower poverty, better outcomes for kids. And if you want to try something that we don't know will have as good of an outcome as this other thing, then it's the risk is that you have a lower outcome. If having these relationships that we haven't tested, like polyamorous relationships,
Yes,
if it happens to be the case that those are not as good at promoting lower poverty rates, better child welfare, lower crime, then that's a consequence that will happen to society if we do promote those. So we should wait until we actually have data to say that, yes, these are as good or better than the monogamous relationships.
So
how do you
just think
propose
we
you
should
get the
just
data?
not try new things?
How
We
do you
should
pro-
try
how do
it. We shouldn't promote it before it's been
Yeah,
tested.
yeah. He's
Well, I'm not saying promote it, right? I'm saying don't promote marriage.
yeah. Okay.
Right.
So
Why?
yeah, I think he's trying to draw a distinction here. So yeah, saying that don't promote this thing because it's he believes it inherently stigmatizes the other thing, right? That in people's minds, marriage takes primacy. And if I'm getting this wrong, please correct me. But that within our culture, marriage takes primacy because it has this advantage, right? It has these centuries of cultural importance, right? And that anything else that's like diverging from that will inherently be stigmatized, even if your parents never mention the words like polyamory to you, right? It's that like, well, this isn't how what I understand to be normal, right? What I've always been told, right? But it's not like, for instance, with Fawn talking about how, when she was a child, she used to, dream of getting married, right? But that marriage included the one guy, right? And not anything else. Now, our parents, I don't know anything about our parents, but they may have never said the words, right? Either polyamory or even gay marriage, right? They never talked about that. But the very fact that those were her expectations, like, is enough. What do you think about that, T-Jump?
I'm not sure what you mean here by stigmatized. So like if I said to my kids, you should get a job, you should not become a YouTuber as your profession because it's a very like stable career. Like obviously this is a kind of stigmatization because I'm saying like this is a less reliable way to make an income so you can feed yourself. So you should get a real job, even though I'm a YouTuber. So obviously if there is a method that we know for a fact works better or is more proven to work better than the other methods, we should absolutely promote that because it's like, should you get a job or should you just sell all of your stuff and buy lottery tickets? Well, job is the better bet here. And so the same thing would apply to marriage or any kind of institution in society. If we have a lot of evidence that this one method works really, really well, and we don't have a lot of evidence for other methods, then the one method that works really, really well is the thing we should promote because it's the most successful thing we know of currently.
So, but Fawn and Spoon, sneaky debate man. I keep calling him Spoon because that's his other name. But what they're talking about though is, and I believe they said it multiple times, is not promoting the one, right? So, like, it's simply saying that we can get that level of acceptance if, like, a society says, well, there are many different types of family arrangements, right? Here's a list. You choose whatever feels right to you, right? Is that no? If I'm getting that wrong, correct me. Spoon, what do you think?
Yeah, that's how I understood what they were saying too.
Okay.
But if we're saying that we shouldn't tell people the most successful method, that's like saying let's not tell people to get a job. Let's just promote all of them equally.
So I think you're kind of like stuck within a set framework of your thinking, right? So like society has a problem, and as it creates crime and poverty and all these things, right? So we have like a solution to this, which is get married, right? Because it reduces these things. People tend to be happier when they're with a partner, right?
Sure. He froze.
Yeah.
Did I lose connection?
Oh.
Yes, sorry. No, I'm so sorry. It's just my fucking internet's patchy.
It's okay.
He said yes. Go ahead.
So your solution to this issue is to promote this thing that like mitigates the issue, right? So my solution is, instead of promoting this thing that mitigates the issue, it creates a society in which these issues don't happen, and thus the downsides of the prescription of getting married don't manifest.
Yeah, that's a nice ideal. I can definitely understand the goal, but the problem is that if we try to implement the solution you're suggesting, will that approach be as successful as my approach or not? Now, we have lots and lots of data that says my approach is successful. We have no data that says your approach is successful. So yours is inherently more risky. And so as a rational human being, I should go with the one that has all the evidence behind it. And obviously, I'm happy to test your method in isolated cases, but
Not the rational human being. No.
the rational human being follows the evidence. That's
Okay.
what it means.
Well, Fawn, go ahead, and then Nathan, then Biggs.
Sorry, sorry, I don't mean to be laughing at you. I just okay. My idea, my way of coming at this is from an idea of like social stigma that seems to be on for like different forms of relationships that aren't marriage, even if that's like a monogamous pairing, going like that stay together forever but they're not married, because while you like might not mean to stigmatize things, even with your example of like saying, hey kids, don't become a YouTuber, that because it might not work out and you should probably get a real job. If your kid then really wants to become a YouTuber and then goes, hey, I've actually become a YouTuber, I'm so sorry, then you've kind of automatically stigmatized that, and it can just make people feel bad. I've kind of forgotten where I'm going with this. I'm so sorry. My brain is running on caffeine and absolutely nothing else. But do you know what I mean? Am I making any sense?
I get it.
Thank you, Nathan.
Well, Nathan, go, then Biggs.
You've created a stigma without possibly meaning to.
Yeah. So I guess I definitely understand the point that Fawn just made, like saying like, oh, don't become a YouTuber, it's not a good job, or you could fail, go get a regular job. I mean, it's always good advice to tell someone to get a regular job, but there is that sort of creation of like, don't become a YouTuber. There's the stigmatization there, or stigmatization there. So I get the point that was being made, but I wanted to ask or explore this question that was proposed earlier. The inherent like naturalness of monogamy, right? So obviously there are polyamorous people, right? But like, and obviously society enforces monogamy. But I'm very curious to hear what you guys think about like my take on this. So I feel like monogamy is like Fawn mentioned earlier, like polyamory could be looked at like something like how sexualities are. So there's like straight people, gay people, etc. And the LGBTQ community is the minority of people, but they exist, right? Obviously, polyamorous people exist. But I think people are, generally speaking, more leaning towards being monogamous, not just because society tells them to, but for example, when you like somebody, right? Like those natural emotions of liking somebody, and then you see them getting along with somebody else or whatever, and you feel that jealousy. I don't think someone would feel that jealousy just because society told them to. You know what I'm saying? I think that's very natural of us. I don't think that's like some weird like territorial stuff, but I think it's just, we like somebody, and for whatever reason, we want to just be with them and them only. Now that's not for everybody. But I'm very curious. Do you guys think that monogamy is more natural for everybody? Not everybody, but for the majority?
So we'll go to Biggs first and then Spoon. But like, I know exactly what you're talking about, Nathan, right?
I do think so.
These
yeah.
are the feelings that I have when Spoon is on any other Twitch panel, and he's supposed to be with me and only me, and it's a problem otherwise, right? But I keep that to myself. All right, Biggs, go.
I would never cheat on you, Prime.
Thank you. See, there we go. Loyalty. You should learn that, Spoon. No.
I'm a Twitch show, okay?
I definitely agree with Nathan on this one, and as well as Fawn on what she was saying. But I'll discuss what Nathan was saying first. I think that from a relationship standpoint, I don't know how many of you have been in long-term relationships, but they take a lot of work, and they take a lot of understanding. They take a lot of effort, and I think that it makes it a lot more difficult when you add more people to the equation. Again, some people are able to do it, but I think overall, as social beings, we have a finite amount that we can give, and I think when we have these relationships, we want to give that whole amount to one other person. Again, not everybody, but I would say in general, that's my feeling on that. But one thing I think that we haven't really talked about here is I don't really see, I know some of the studies that T-Jump had brought up about marriage being statistically better overall for society. I think that is partially true, but I also think it's more just the strong family unit. But I don't necessarily think you need to have marriage to have that. I think what you really need in those situations is just love, understanding, caring, and things like that. But what I wanted to ask T Jump, and then maybe you can get this later, but if do you see anything that is actually that marriage actually does that prevents bad situations from happening? Because to me, you can be married and still do a lot of messed up stuff, right? Is it really that much of a barrier that really makes that much of a difference on whether or not things are actually better or not? I see where some cases it might be, maybe people don't want to leave for the financial reasons, having to pay child support and alimony and things like that. But I think for the most part, it's really not that big of a hurdle, and I don't really think we focus so much on this stuff. And I think if we took a step back and had people more focused on the love and the caring, the relationship itself, and not just these declarations of whatever, I think we'd be better off overall.
I totally disagree. I think that all of the stats show that for sure, marriage, for whatever reason, the fact that there is some social contract that's a part of it, does have better outcomes. Just if we're looking at the data, I mean, I imagine there's equally as much love between an unmarried couple and a married couple, but the married couple seems to do better, and their children seem to do better, and they seem to have less crime and less poverty, everywhere in the world. Marriage is probably the best predictor of the lower poverty levels of any state, more than race, education, anything. So it seems like marriage as a social contract kind of a theory does in fact have a impact of making better outcomes for whatever reason, because it just impacts us in that way. I did want to comment on the monogamy thing. Humans have only been monogamous for about 1,000 years. We are mostly non-monogamous as a species.
So
Yeah.
we're gonna go.
Wait, quickly.
So hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Let's go to Spoon, Nathan, and then Fawn. But okay, well, let's do that first. Spoon.
So I was gonna say about Nathan, right? You got to be very careful when you say something is natural, right? I don't really think it's within our purview to speculate on the truth of human nature, because I hate to break it to you, but we live in a society, and we always have lived in a society.
No.
We've literally always lived in a society. Humanity has not existed out of a society. I'm afraid we do live in a society. So we don't know if this is natural or it's as a result of living in a society. So you got to be very careful when you do that, right? And so again, I'm not sold on this idea that jealousy is innately natural, or it's innate to society or whatever. I don't really care, right? I don't think it's important. The point is, it's not really a good thing at the end of the day. It doesn't really promote good outcomes, jealousy. So it should probably just do away with it, regardless of if it's natural or taught. There's only one of these things that we can actually impact, and that's the social aspect of it, right? If it is natural, so be it. We'll have to get over that some other way. And if it's as a result of society, we can deal with that through societal means. And secondly, I just wanted to jump back to what Fawn said earlier, right? So this idea of like polyamory, right? This doesn't have to be like specifically romantic, right? I love my friends, and like I said, I'd be happy to live with my friends.
Based.
So you can have these like sort of like, I guess, like commune kind of setups. It doesn't necessarily have to be romantic. And there's not really any downside to this. Like I said earlier, actually in pretty much every aspect, polyamory and like sort of communal raising and stuff like that is actually better, right? It's better financially, it's better socially, it's better for child rearing, it's better for like every benefit that you could possibly get out of marriage. Like it's a much more preferable alternative. Like, yeah.
So I actually want to push back on this a little bit, right? I'm just thanking someone for a gift sub. Thank you for the gift sub, Chloe. Thanks so much. Okay, I wanted to push back a little bit on this. On I guess maybe where T-Jump was trying to go from this, and if I'm ever butchering your point, T-Jump, then let me know. But like polygamy, sorry, no, oh, we'll get to that later. Polyamory, polyamory. No, like it seems to me has more points of failure, right? Like it is difficult. As Biggs will tell you, right, as a married person, is it difficult to have a marriage between two individuals, right? So if you have some sort of relationship with 3, 4, 5 individuals, well, that's more ways that it can all blow up. And we've seen and maybe been in relationships that have melted down. Is not a pretty thing, right? So like in the context of child rearing, right? Would it be better if we had like more opportunities for people to fall apart disastrously? Would it be, and not even just that, right? Like people drift, right? So people drift. Like if you're saying that it's the family unit, the stable family unit, that is the most valuable thing, well then anything that introduces less stability, right? Being people again just drifting apart. Like would be, I mean, that would be problematic, right? I mean, that would be less desirable, right, Spoon?
Yeah, I guess, but like under my sort of like communal solution, you might drift away from one person. It doesn't matter because you got like 4 other people there to like talk to and like be with and like be friends with. Like I don't know how your like friendship dynamics are, but like generally speaking, it seems to me that like people are like really close with like one person, and then like through generally geographic factors, like they like drift apart from them a bit, and they're like really friends with another person, and like it's not like they're not friends with the person who they were closer with before, but like they're just just not as close, right? And I feel like it would work like that. The dynamic, if anything, would still be better because if in a monogamous relationship you drift away from one person, and that's it, you're like fucked basically, right? You get like you have to rely on somebody else who you haven't been as close with.
So I'm not 100% familiar with like polyamory and stuff like that, but are we like talking about like multiple like different genders, or are we talking about like one of one gender and like multiple of the other gender? Like what type of like polyamory relationships are just all
Whatever
kinds,
works,
just
really.
everything?
Yeah,
Just whatever
the
works.
above?
Yeah, like whatever you're comfortable with.
yeah, it's
Okay. I was just curious.
no, yeah. Just that you're opening up your relationship to love more than one person. You can have a primary that you're with, right? So like yeah, and then outside of that, there's many different formulations of this. But then outside of that, you each, or maybe just one of you, goes out and has these other connections, right? They don't necessarily have to be sexual. They can be just like romantic or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I think it's actually a worthwhile question because not everyone might know what we're talking about. So fair enough. Or you could have more than one like major relationships, and then the other ones are minors. So it's all kinds of ways that can happen.
And I think this really goes to what you were saying earlier, Prime, about like the points of failure. I really like that argument a lot because I really do agree with that, especially when you're getting into like you guys mentioned. Because I'm like I said, I'm just like kind of like new to understanding this whole concept. But when you add especially all that additional complexity to those relationships, I think that definitely can put a lot of strain and, like you said, points of failure. So that's why, and I don't necessarily think it's necessarily bad or anything like that, but I'm just saying like the chances of things going wrong and more people being affected by that could be a little bit more than the just one person, I guess.
I think that's true. I think there's like with any sort of like complex mechanism, there are obviously like more points at which it can fail, right? Like a car is much more likely to have an issue than a spanner, right? However, you've also got more supporting systems. So for example, if a spanner breaks, that spanner is broken. However, you can drive a car with a fucked engine for fucking ages, right? There is more supporting structure around it. So although there is more chance of it breaking, there is also more around it to support it. So it's more likely to keep functioning.
Let's go to Nathan, then Fawn.
Yeah, so I can't speak for how everybody would handle a polyamorous relationship, but I could not. Like, I'm just like imagining the scenarios. Like, let's say like we're sleeping or whatever. I'm just like hugging one of them, and then the other one touches me. I'm like, fuck off, me, bro. You know. But
And that's okay.
yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. But I mean, look, I like freedom. I value freedom. So if someone wants to do that, I think they should. You know what? If those people want marriage licenses, give them marriage licenses. You know, since we're talking about marriage. But yeah, I did want to respond to one of the points that T-Jump made, because I'm curious about this as well. He was saying that marriage is a good indicator of like success in a variety of ways, a lot of poverty, crime, etc. But I'm curious, is marriage the indicator, like the cause of such good results, or is it more the good results and marriage is one of the good results? So for example, is marriage the one reducing poverty and reducing crime, or is the fact that someone's in better conditions where they don't have to turn to crime, and when they're not in poverty, that they can then focus on the relationship to put a bit more resources there and have a better, more stable relationship as a result of their better position? So
I think they,
I
they
don't.
facilitate each other, right? Like if you're in
Yeah.
a stable relationship, you're less likely to commit crime, and also you're less like, and also if you're in a less likely to commit crime if you've got somebody like that relies on you, right? Like they feed into each other. But again, this is only magnified by my polyamorous communes argument, right? You got more people relying on you, got more people supporting you, so it reduces the chances even more, right? And again, it's not like marriage itself or having like a single person that like does this for you. It's like the feelings there. It's like the mutual understanding and the connection you share. And this is only amplified like the more people you have relying on you, or the more people you have to rely on. Conversely,
T-Jump, if you want to
Yeah,
start.
So
And we're sorry.
So to respond to the two things, first, there are a number of studies on polyamorous relationships. They don't have as many positive benefits as monogamous relationships. So the stats just don't agree with what you say sounds nice, but I don't see any actual data to support what you're saying. And then Nathan asked, what's the cause? Is marriage the cause? And in science, you can't prove cause. It's always going to be correlation. And the best way to assess what the most likely cause is to say, well, what is the most common factor in all of the most successful groups? So like there's usually, they share hundreds of different variables, and you want to say, well, what is the one that's the most common? What is the highest indicator or the highest predictor of this thing? And marriage is the highest predictor. So of all the different variables that it could be, this is the one that's the most likely to be the cause.
Fair.
Yeah, but I would also say if these couples, these married couples, if you talked to them and said, if you were educated in alternative, no, not even that. If it's like if you knew that this relationship was going to work and you were like 100% committed, but if you went, you don't have to get married, you could just have a civil union and get all these benefits, and you wouldn't have to spend all that money on those sort of things, would you do that? And I think a lot of people would say, yeah, that'd be great because it would have more money for the kids. And so I don't necessarily think that it's the crux of it is marriage.
Yeah.
I think that the crux of it is a commitment and a family bond.
It's like the alternative I'm proposing capitalizes on the sources of the benefits in a traditional marriage, right? Like, so like it's better to have a marriage financially because you've got two people contributing to the income of the household, right? Again, this goes up like logically, this goes up because you've got more people contributing in like a commune kind of style thing, right?
Yeah, and
Like,
it doesn't
it
even
makes
need to
perfect sense.
like people can be in monogamous relationships in that situation. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm more
I
I'm
feel
more
like
talking about like the material like living
Yeah.
conditions of these people, not like the actual like specific relationship, because like
not
the
like
marriage
everyone fucking each other.
Yeah, like
And I-
I'm pro
marriage is
civil
like there
unions.
specifically for like
Just to clarify, in most of the studies, civil unions are essentially the same as marriage. So they're functionally the same thing in the study. So yeah, I'm totally fine with
Okay,
civil
good.
unions.
That's good news.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they counted. I mean, like I'm glad that counts towards that study because I think that makes a lot of sense.
I'm very curious, like, and again, I'm not like trying to make any pointed statements or anything like that. And I don't know if we have like we probably won't be able to have this information right in front of us, but I'm very curious. What is the sort of like starting wealth for these people? Not to focus on class or anything when we're talking about
True.
like marriage, but like let's say like you have two individuals that are, children of middle-class parents, well-off middle-class parents, and they get together because they're just in the same circles. Maybe they go to the same school, and then they could be their high school sweetheart story, and they just had a better start, and then they got more money
I
to
think you're
get gifts and
actually
stuff.
I think conversely, right, you're actually more likely to get married the poorer you are, because like when you're poor, you need to capitalize on these benefits a bit more. So like it's not that like richer people tend to get married more.
But
It's
can you
poor people tend to get married more.
Do you think
I would disagree with that because I'm sorry. I'll try to be quick. I would disagree with that because I think one of the big reasons for like divorce and stuff is stress, like I said earlier, and finance is a usual cause of stress. So a majority of this country are not in the best position, and that's why I think if there is a high rate of divorce, which I'm not sure, because as Prime explained, the 50% number is probably not accurate. It doesn't surprise me when so many people are struggling. So I think if you have two poor people, they probably have to focus their attention on survival, and that probably stresses them out, and that probably can't make them the best of partners, So I think if you're rich, you're in a better position for
for a
things like
successful marriage, yeah.
relationships.
But like
Yeah.
in terms of like who's getting married, poor people are getting married more. Like successful marriages often come when they don't have these extraneous factors putting pressure on the marriage, which, like you said, like finances and stuff.
To answer Nathan's question, they account for wealth differences, and the same positive impact is true across all wealth differences, and so it doesn't make a difference what wealth level you're at for the study.
Yeah, it's always beneficial, yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to tackle something that teacher was talking about, like the difference between an unmarried couple and a married couple. And I think there's something to this, right? Not to say that their love and their commitment to each other is any different, but you hear it from married people all the time, right? Like we were together for however many years beforehand, right? And we were committed to each other, we loved each other. Then we got married, and marriage is different, right? That there is something, all right, the je ne sais quoi about marriage that changes the dynamic of the relationship, right? I'm not exactly sure what it is. I haven't been married, so I can't tell you. But maybe it's the fact that like you are now legally tied, right? That like that the option of leaving isn't just the door anymore, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's I'll finish quickly. Maybe it's the social pressures around it, right? That like you've both declared yourself in this special quote unquote solemn way, and now you feel like you're stuck in it, right? Maybe it's just like it's like that like psychological, like there's this just psychological shift because you yourself feel that this is something this puts your relationship on a different plane, and now you look at your partner differently, or maybe it's all these things, right? But marriage is different, and so like I think it's like I think it's not like irrational to say that because people have these pressures, right? They feel this way about marriage rather than simply being together otherwise, that it forces them to stay together and like those outcomes for the children might, on a whole, not for an individual couple, but on a whole across the demographic, might end up better for children, right? So
I think like we do this with like all levels of relationship, right? So like we sort of commit, and the more you get committed and the more you intertwine your life with the other person, the bigger the ramifications are for exiting that relationship, right? So like right in the beginning, you've got like, I don't know, moving a toothbrush into their apartment, right? And that's like nothing, right? It's no commitment. Like you've made a commitment there because you said, I'll be back, right? I'm coming back to this place. That's why I put a toothbrush there. But it's not like a big commitment. You can shrug that off easy and buy another toothbrush. Not a big deal. And marriage is like the final, like it's like the deadbolt on the door. Like I'm locked in. All right, I'm locking in. Right, I'm fully fucking intertwined. Chain. Yeah, I'm like intertwined into this. Right, like all our finances are intertwined. Legally, we're intertwined. Right, this is like I said earlier, it's like the ultimate sign of commitment. Right. But like I said, this doesn't necessarily have to be through marriage. We do these things just as a result of being together, more trust in your partner. Like I said, I'm not married to my girlfriend. All our fucking finances are intertwined. I pay for shit, she pays for shit. I owe her money, she owes me money. We don't fucking keep track of this shit anymore, right? Because we just know that we're just, if one of us needs money, we just give the other one money, right? It's in my benefit to make sure my girlfriend is financially stable and vice versa. So we just kind of do this anyway, and marriage is only just a way to sanctify that. It's not actually any like difference between that and like a couple that's already living together. I mean, I know there are like legal ramifications, right?
But don't brush that off. Fun. Oh, we're gonna get to you soon, right? But don't brush that off. That's actually quite important. No, the fact that she has legal access to your funds, right? Like that like a joint bank account, right? Like that means something, right?
But you don't have to be married for that, do you?
Well, true, but like I'm saying that when you separate, right? You're saying that these things are actually equal, but when you separate, they'll be coming for that money, right?
Well, that's why I say like marriage is like another level of commitment, right? So because like I said, like with the moving your toothbrush in, you might have to sacrifice a toothbrush if you decide things aren't going to work out. But when you're married, you have to go through fucking like divorce proceedings. Like the stakes are higher, right? You have to go through like settlements and who gets this and who gets what, who gets custody over the kids, right? The stakes are higher. But like quite frankly, when these things are intertwined, like you'd probably do these things anyway, wouldn't you? If you have kids with someone and you're not married to them, you still have a custody battle, right? If your finances are intertwined and you're not married to each other, you'd still have a fight over that. There's not really that much difference.
So we're gonna go on next, but like I read something from a divorce lawyer, right, on their website, and it's very poignant, saying that marriage is the most legally significant thing that happens in almost everyone's life, right? Like the most legally the most complex legal agreement you get into when that most people will do, because most of us aren't like CEOs running some Fortune 500 company, right? It's marriage, and it's significant and it's huge, but people don't quite understand like the full complexities of it. And like maybe we should literally give people classes to understand what you're getting into when you get married, because people have a faint idea, but they don't know. But they'll find out the hard way if things fall apart.
Like if anything, that's like a point against marriage, right? It just makes things more difficult. Like you'd have these proceedings one way or another. Like marriage is only going to make this more difficult. Like why would you want that? Like just to show your commitment?
But no, there's more to it. But like I want to get Fawn in first, but then we'll argue about that. Fine.
Sorry, I wasn't laughing at you before, Prime. I can't get over this comment that says nothing says romance like legally obligated. That was just sorry, marriage freaks me out. So it scares me because
it's nothing to be scared of, really. It's not.
No, I know. It's just so my parents are still together. My parents have been together like their whole I don't know. They separated for a little bit of time before I was born, and then got back together and had me. Wow. And me and my sister always talk about how they should not be together. My parents are two people who stayed married for the kids, and they probably shouldn't have. So I don't know if that's probably why it personally scares me. But yeah, I mean, it does seem to be a big commitment, and I kind of agree with Prime that maybe it should be taught even more, and say like you don't learn about marriage in school. I mean, at least I didn't. You don't get, like, in your health classes, you don't get taught, like, you get taught about
Marriage
ST.
lessons.
Yeah, you don't get taught about, hey, this means that you're contractually obliged to the XYZ or whatever. But I know that I'm assuming it's probably the same in other countries. Like in New Zealand, if you are living with a partner for, like, I think it's over 3 years, then they basically have the same rights to your stuff as if you were married. I know this because my aunt had to kick out a couple of boyfriends before those 3 years were up, so that she didn't have to give them all of her shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a civil marriage, I think, right? Is what it's called. But
Yeah, I don't actually know, but yeah, it sounds like something that most Western countries would have.
yeah. But so is there anyone else who wants to jump in? Then do that. If not, I'll yell at Spoon some more.
Well, I was gonna say, trying to think, what is New Zealand like? Genuine question. Like, it seems like a pretty cool country. Like, it's like small, good social programs, pretty chill president,
Prime Minister.
prime minister. Sorry, that's the
Well,
American in me.
That's okay. That's okay. I enjoy educating Americans. I mean, like, I feel like a lot of, I don't know, I feel like because the state of things in the United States can be so messy, I think that a lot of people look to New Zealand as some kind of utopia. But honestly, there's a lot of issues here. And
Is it better than Australia?
it depends what you mean by better. Like, socially, possibly. I mean, we still have racism. Obviously, everywhere has fucking racism. But Australia is particularly bad. Sorry, I feel like Prime was to cut me off because this is off topic.
Get back to the topic at hand.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sure.
I'm just saying New Zealand is not like the perfect utopia that I feel like a lot of people think it is, because Jacinda Ardern is like in the spotlight, and I just want to say, please manage your expectations.
Not like you'll be able to go there anyway. They're very strict on who gets to live there.
Stay out. I don't want coronavirus.
I'm from the epicenter. I'm from Florida.
No, get out.
Okay, so I forget what Spoon said, and that I wanted to yell at him about, but maybe I'll think of it later. But I'll find something else to yell at him about. But I did want to move this along without remaining time, because there was lots of parts to this question, and I want to get your opinions on it. Okay, so I asked you. I think I would have this in front of me when I said that, but here it is. All right. So we talked about the couples and all that, right? But like gay marriage, right? So
good.
So many individuals fought for gay marriage, right? And I imagine gay marriage is legal in New Zealand. Just asking, Vaughn.
Yes, I believe it isn't in Australia still.
Okay.
Australia's fucked.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay, fair enough. So, so many people fought for this, right? But if we are listing, we spent, was it 2 hours or so, listing all the problems of marriage, was this a worthwhile prize, right? For all the things that, our gay brothers and sisters could have spent those decades fighting over, was marriage the thing that makes the most sense, right? Rather than, for instance, like economic guarantees, right? I compare this to and I know these aren't exactly the same, so no one needs to yell at me in fucking chat, but like I compare this to when African Americans were freed from bondage in this nation, right? And they were given voting rights. Okay, that's good, great, but like that didn't necessarily grant them freedom, right? Instead, maybe if they had been given economic freedom, which grants you political freedom, then anything else could have flowed after it, right? It's like this. So relating it back to this, and these are not the same, obviously, but that marriage is a symbol, right? More of a status of legitimacy, right? But if our LGBT brothers and sisters were more economically secure, then anything else would have flowed, right? Like all those other things come after having that economic power, and that's just one example of something that could be fought for. So yeah, what do y'all think?
I see what you're saying, but I feel like a big part of the fight for the right to get married is the fact that a lot of the people gatekeeping marriage are people who are anti-LGBT rights. So I feel like a big part of that was a big fuck you. And it's I totally agree that there are more important rights to be fought for, but this I totally see at the same time why it was so important to get gay married,
Yeah. I think that I think it just kind of, the reason why it was fought so hard, the reason why people really wanted gay people to be able to get married, and the gay people themselves really wanted to get married, I think just goes to show that, like, even though we're talking about many of the potential negatives of marriage is still something people want. People still, I see what you mean, Fawn, when it's like somewhat of a fuck you to like the people telling them, no, you can't get married. But I do think in a bit more of a wholesome way, they just want to be happy,
and like everyone else,
yeah,
they should have the
like
same
everyone
rights
else.
as everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
think it's
wholesome
that
stuff.
simple, right? If like straight people can get, like, again, I'm not really big on marriage, probably discovered that. But if straight people can do it, gay people should be allowed to do it too. And it's not specifically about marriage, right? It's about equality. So civil partnerships or like civil unions were available for gay people like for a long time, right? You could still do that, and we all agree that they basically have the same benefits, or they might not have historically, but nowadays they certainly do. So it's not about that. It's about the cultural significance of gay people being allowed to get married, and us like normalizing like gay people and being like, yeah, no, if a straight person can do it, a gay person should be allowed to do it. And yeah, I guess there are like more important things to fight for and blah blah blah. But this is like part of it. That's part of the fight, and like that being achieved is very good. And especially with being gay specifically, it's distinct from other issues like for example race. You can't so much hide the fact that you're black, but you can hide that you're gay. So it's harder to be discriminated in that sense on, especially when it comes like economically. And I think gay people do have like a disproportionate amount of wealth, like less wealth, but like not by like such a distinct amount. And that is due to some like marginalization and stuff like that, and stigma, and, blah blah blah. But like I said, it's less so because it's simply just an easier thing to hide, right? It's harder to discriminate about something if you simply just can't discriminate, right? You just don't know. You're not aware of being able to discriminate on that thing. So again, it's not about marriage specifically. It's about equality. It's about if a straight person can do it, a gay person should be allowed to do it as well.
Let's go to Biggs and T-Jump. I want to hear what all your opinions on this.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Sneaky Debate Man said. I think everybody should be able to have the same rights to do what they want to do. Like I said, I'm not really 100% for marriage in general. Anyways, I think the things that we have now, we can create solid families and things like that without necessarily having to have marriage. But like you said, like it's about equality. It's about having the same rights. Our Constitution states that everybody should be equal under the law. We have, a lot of cases where that's not necessarily followed, but we're trying to amend those now. One of the things that we've done, recently was the gay marriage thing, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Especially when it's something like that where it has no real negative impetus on anybody else. Like, it's really just a net benefit to the people getting married. So I don't really see what argument can be made against it, because it's not affecting anybody else in a negative way. Some might say that it might be like, oh, you're basically like advocating for this, this union, but really it's not. We're just saying that these people have the same rights as everybody else.
T-Jump, are you do you live in the States, or are you also a filthy foreigner?
I live on Mars. I'm alone. But yeah, I'm from the States. I'm in Minnesota.
Okay.
Yeah, so I am definitely pro gay marriage. I think that works just as well and sometimes better than regular marriages for all the benefits for lowering crime, lowering poverty, and raising kids. Many of the kid studies involving gay couples, the kids actually turn out better than heterosexual couples. So I think that I'm pro gay marriage for sure.
Yeah, but I guess the question I'm going, well, and this is again to everyone, is that, oh, I'll go Fawn, go, then I'll.
Oh no, I just realized what I was going to say. I think the one reason that I've heard for like anti-gay marriage, which I don't agree with, but I've heard it a lot, is the religious reasons of being like, it's in the Bible that being gay is wrong and marriage is for God. So, and it's like, well, is it for God or is it for the government? Which one is it? Because they should. That is the one thing about marriage that makes me uncomfortable, is how intertwined it makes the church and getting stuff legally done. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it is not good. I don't agree with it, but I've heard that a lot.
Yeah, I guess in response to that, personally, if I think someone has the perspective that marriage is for God, you wouldn't really need to get the state involved.
That's what I think. So
yeah.
that's what I agree. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't think you should. I don't think that they should be intertwined.
Yeah.
Yeah, and oh, sorry.
No,
go ahead.
you go ahead. Finish your point.
Yeah. I guess from like those that argue that marriage is a more like, religious thing. I mean, like, they can have their opinions on that, but ultimately, when it comes down to it, marriage as we know it really is more for the purpose of like partly the individuals and partly for the state. It just kind of is what it is.
Yeah.
Now, I guess just quickly respond to this question, because it says, Ugly Pie asked this in chat. To all my marriage lovers on the panel, what about marriage between more or two people? Do the benefits of marriage increase exponentially? I just got to be honest. I don't really know what would be. I know Sneaky was talking about like there's a lot of potential benefits from like polyamorous relationships, but I'm not an expert on that. I know for me, and I don't know if other people would feel this way. I feel like if there was more people in a relationship, it would be a little bit chaotic for me. I think that there would be some people I feel closer to than others, and I understand that like Sneaky was saying that there's like a benefit in that, but like I think let's say like I feel something like let's say there's 3 people, I feel something more for one person than the other person, and it just kind of feels weird that like the third person's living there, but then like the other people like each other and I get jealous or something. It just feels like there's a lot of complications. I don't know. It's not for me, but it's definitely for other people though. The other people can probably handle that question better.
Okay.
Like one large issue with the data on like polyamorous relationships or like marriages with like multiple like polygamy is that generally speaking these tend to occur in like countries with sort of like very strict patriarchal views where like the man owns the woman or he owns multiple women and stuff like that, or they have like very like set gender roles. So like when we look at like polygamous relationships and stuff like that, be like, are they successful? Like the only kind of source of data we have for these come from places that have just kind of questionable ethics to begin with. So I don't necessarily think that's like reflective of like the possible benefits of this. I mean, I am conjecturing a lot here. But I'm simply just trying to extrapolate like the logical benefits of like monogamy and partnership, and then like trying to maximize that in a setting which would be beneficial to most people.
So, but okay, I guess well, you're taking this where I was going to go any which way. Uh, so with polygamy specifically, right? So you can say that sure, a lot of this data comes from some those other countries with maybe social structures that we might disagree with, but polygamy also exists here, and we can also see the terrible outcomes that have been the result. Now, something I think you could say is that polygamy uh, right now only exists in the context of fringe groups. But the data is the data, right? Maybe it's that polygamy and something about that inherently brings all these other issues, right? So, like, if that's the case, if we're looking at all of this, we're seeing that polygamy has these bad outcomes, then should we at least, rather than saying that people, like we were saying before, that these are all your options and pick among them, right? Or rather, should we be saying, okay, well, some things are better than others, right? Teach-Up is getting to this, right? Like some things are better than others, right? So marriage might be a better system than as we know it is because we have the data there, right? We know it is because you can see with your own eyes these strong relationships. But polygamy, oh, that brings problems, right? That maybe inherently, at least within the context of our culture, right? Maybe not in the context of some other culture, but in context of this culture, that inherently breeds a patriarchal structure, right?
Yeah.
So could we say that at least?
Yeah, so like I will say like the data around this is like rickety at best because like it's not very common, and where it is common, then you've got all these other intersections with like culture and ethics and blah blah blah, lots of these other factors, and that's still the same in like Western cultures, which would probably apply to like most of us on this panel. So it is very difficult to say, right? But either way, it's conjecture, right? So going back to what I said earlier, right, I'm proposing like a paradigm shift rather than a model shift, right? Not simply have polygamy under our current social system, but redesign the social system entirely, and then you could have sort of like beneficial, not necessarily polygamous, but like more sort of like communal, communally reliant relationships.
Yeah.
So like it is like either way, it's conjecture. It's just about who's got like the logical steps on their side, I guess.
One.
I know kind of what you mean. I guess I feel like some of the problems that people might have with these kind of ideas is that is if people are in a polygamous or polyamorous relationship in which obviously involves like sex and romantic feelings and stuff like that. Like, what about just a straight up commune?
I think
What
it
about
triggers like a disgust reaction,
yeah?
right? But like I think this disgust reaction is like inherent to society. Like so, for example, like if you talked about like if I said like gay people, like gay sex, like 100 years ago, that would trigger a disgust reaction, right?
Yeah.
Nowadays, we all hear that like it's not even worth considering, right? It doesn't even ping on the radar.
Sounds like fun. Sounds like a
Um,
party. Sorry, go ahead.
Exactly right. Like if anything,
Exactly.
it's like a positive reaction to
Base.
that nowadays, right? So like I think it is like very entrenched in our culture, this sort of like disgust reaction, like oh I'd be very jealous, or oh I'd have this, or I'd have that, and again I think like logically you could come to the conclusion that well that may not be the case. I know we could change the paradigm of like society and our culture, and we could actually um, yield a lot of benefits from a society that was more set up towards sort of like being more communal in this sense.
Yeah. Like a point that I wanted to bring up is the fact that obviously when we're talking about the nuclear family and we're talking about being with one person and finding that one person and all of that, those kind of family dynamics, this is a very Western cultural ideal, and in Western cultures we are very individualist, and so I think that there's a big that's like a big contributing factor to the social pressure of like find your one person and then do everything with that one person, and you raise your kids, and that's the important thing, is that they're getting everything from their parents, and in reality it just doesn't really work like that. And so I'm half Samoan, and Samoan culture is a lot more, for lack of a better term, communist. And obviously they're not a Western society, and a lot of the time there's a lot of sharing of the parental duties. A lot of the time, you know, if you have a problem child, sometimes you do just send them to live with your brother or sister for a while, and they get to see a different side of life. They're raised by many people, and it's a community thing, and I don't know, it's very healthy. I don't know how else to say it, but that society, while it might not be first world, it is, from what I've seen, a very good society for raising kids. There's a lot of joy and just a lot of like freedom that I see that doesn't come from the nuclear family. The nuclear family can be very isolating sometimes if people have very strict views. Like I was raised very strictly. I couldn't go out and see a lot of my friends when I wanted to, and I don't know. My parents really wanted their ideals to be the only ones that got through to me, which I think is why they specifically didn't. And do you know what I mean? I'm sorry,
No.
I end all my thoughts with that.
No, it's
But
fine.
there's just a lot more ways of living and raising kids and just interacting with society than the Western society that we are used to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
like we said, like there's no data on this, but like all the data is confined with our current paradigm, right? We have to
Yeah.
like you kind of have to like shift your thinking out of the current framework of society, rather than just be like, ah, well, this makes sense currently within this context. Well, just change the context, or change like the the general framework, and maybe there could be something better, right? Got to think outside of the box, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was thinking when I was listening to all like the talk about like sort of communal raising of like a kid. Um and Fawn talked about how different cultures handle different things. I think about like, you know, Hispanic cultures, even like Filipinos, and I'm sure like other countries around the world do this to some form. Where, you know, a lot of times family will continue to live together. Like, you know, like old people growing up with like you live in the same house as like your grandma, for instance.
Yeah.
You know, so for me, when my family faced economic struggle, for example, we got to get huge amount of support from a local family member, which was a big deal, which let us be able to go down the path of renting and then eventually having a mortgage. So all that good stuff. But like, so I thought, like, what could we do policy wise to sort of be there for people that don't have a commune to back them or a community to back them? And you know, things like the things in the new reconciliation bill, childcare, for instance, universal childcare, pre-K, all that good stuff. In a way, even though it's not super personal, it is somewhat community helping out families raising their kids, which, since we're talking about marriage during this whole discussion, could really help people deal with stress and make for better relationships and stable relationships. But yes.
So, okay, I want to try this and big weight something. In that, Fawn, you said that, you know, marriage is a very Western like a value, but I'm not sure if marriage itself is that Western value. I think it's maybe all
Oh,
the
sorry,
other
I
things.
didn't mean that. I'm not sure if I said that exactly. I meant the nuclear family.
The nuclear family. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, teacher, I'm curious about your opinion here, and to really hone in on what exactly you mean. Is it that you are simply pro the institution of marriage, which is one thing, but do you also think that the nuclear family is necessarily a superior form of family rather than another like form that includes an extended situation?
Well, there's also data on the nuclear family, but the nuclear family also includes gay couples. So that's also part of nuclear family. So, but yeah, nuclear family does have more supporting data than the other kinds, as far as I know.
Yeah, but like I said earlier, right? So like this is in context of our current society, right? So like within the current society where we encourage like having I have 2 kids and a dog and a picket white fence and blah blah blah. Like, yes, it makes sense that this is beneficial because we promote this, right? This is like what we incentivize. We have like literal like legal benefits for people who are in this situation. So like, of course, yeah, makes sense that people in that situation do better because we incentivize that as a society, like socially, legally, right? So like, yes, the data does suggest that this is a good thing, but that's only because it's in context of a society that pushes this as a good thing, right? So
I think that's backwards, actually. I think the reason we promote it is because it has been demonstrated to have positive effects, and that's why we give all of these benefits.
I mean, we'd have to do like a lot of historical analysis for that.
Yeah, that'd be hard to prove either way.
I don't really want to like contest that point, but like I see where you're coming from.
I think there's also an argument to be made that the nuclear family is more researched because it is more popular in Western society. I think that there's probably just less data in other regions, like third world regions. Like I don't think that I haven't done research, sorry, but I don't think that there would be as much research on families in third world countries like Samoa and how that affects people as there are in like how American societies grow in that context, because it's just a very different societies, and it's hard to compare. But I think that there are things to be learned from just different cultures, and I think that maybe those kind of ideas are not pushed because people think, oh well, but that country is poor, so they're not doing as well, whereas socially they might be happier.
Yeah. So, I guess.
What is chat talking about? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine.
They're talking about sex. It's fucking
No,
weird.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was confused too.
Chat, please.
I was also looking at
Neo
chat.
pronoun
DJs.
discourse. Holy shit.
No, why?
I was also looking at chat too. But yeah. So in terms of like finding the path, like the most success. So I guess I think it's problematic just saying that we have to look at the data, because especially in social sciences, it's hard to find the data, right?
Yes, that's what I meant.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. And just because one thing has positive data doesn't, of course, mean the other thing has negative data. I don't think anyone has said that necessarily, right? I'm just putting that out there. That one option has a lot of successful outcomes doesn't mean the other option necessarily has negative outcomes. And furthermore, in terms of the studies, I think most of the studies were focused on the comparison of like marriage rather than single parenthood, right? And the problems between them, rather than marriage, like a 2-person situation rather than a 3-person, 4-person situation, or Yeah, but I though then again, I do know there's studies with just like a married couple versus unmarried couple, and how long cohabitating individuals. So there's that.
We discussed that, didn't we?
Yeah.
Like if you're like married, you're like locked in, right? So you're less likely to leave that marriage because it's like higher boundaries to leaving, right? So it's not necessarily an indicator of like a happy relationship. It's just a relationship with higher boundaries. Right?
It's more like there's more things to discourage leaving.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
Rather
It's not
than
necessarily
reasons to stay.
But
yeah,
if you're talking about in terms of child rearing, now again, this is why I said this before, is that over a large like group, right, a large demographic, you'll find benefits of having those high walls of exit, right? Like trying to make it work. Now that doesn't mean that each individual couple, right, that's good for them. That some couples obviously just need to break up, right? And having those high barriers just makes it difficult to do that, causes stress, and in fact might have a worse outcome. Like a messy divorce is like I think manifestly worse for a child to go through than something that's clean and easy, some sort of clean, easy, simple breakup, right? But over like the large, like a larger demographic, like simply parents deciding that we hit a major bump in the road, but we aren't going to give up because we're in a marriage and that means something, and so we'll stick together. Right? And then they overcome whatever it is, right? Because it was something that could be recovered, but simply would take a lot of work that you would not put into if you weren't married, if you weren't tied, if the consequences for trying to break up weren't so unbelievably catastrophic, frankly, right? And then that would be better for the for child rearing at the very least, right?
No, I'm a little bit torn on that because, like, I feel like it's probably a good thing that they get over their issues as a couple, but perhaps you shouldn't be together if the only reason you stayed together is for like material reasons rather than like you actually want to be together, right? You just like, oh, it's just too much of a hassle to break up. So like I understand like you could like get through a rough patch on this basis, and that might be a good thing, but at the same time, I don't know if getting through a rough patch because it was materially like annoying for you is a good thing. I feel like you should probably be getting through that rough patch because you decide you want to be with that person or you want to make it work because you enjoy being with that person rather than any sort of material gain.
Is it necessary? I mean, it could be all kinds of reasons why a person wants to stick together, right? Like it could be multiple reasons. I'd say one, it could be
I know that.
Yeah. I mean, like the point is relationships are complicated, right? So
I know, but the reason you're saying like they stay together when they're married is because like the boundary to exit is higher, right? And the boundary to exit is higher specifically because it affects your material circumstances, right? And I don't know if necessarily that's a good thing that you stay in relationships because of your material circumstances, even if it does get you through a rough patch and you're otherwise happy.
Maybe it's not that you're staying in a relationship because of that, but you're giving it another try because of that, right? And I think there's a slight difference there.
That's what I mean.
No,
that's what I mean. Like,
okay.
I think you should give it another try because you want to be with that person, right? Because you feel like that person is worth another try, not because of your material conditions.
But
right, I feel like that's how you probably should be in a relationship. Again, I'm kind of torn because I understand like there's like we do have to consider our like material conditions, but at the same time, like on an emotional level, I feel like you should be with somebody because you want to be with them, not because of
no.
how things
you
are.
could still want to be. You could. And at the end, okay, so let's say you were looking at a 50-year marriage, right? And that in that 50-year marriage, there were multiple times where they could have broken up. That if they weren't married, right, they didn't have the boundaries of marriage to keep them penned in together, right, like animals. Then they would have like wandered out of the pen. But
that sounds awful.
But it does.
Oh my god!
It doesn't mean that at the end of those 5 decades, those two people didn't want to be together, right? It simply means that they had an incentive to stay together rather than no incentive to leave.
I get what you're both saying. But I think the reason why this is so hard and can just be like like a constant cycle, is because there will be some people that are just staying together because of the financial hardship or financial benefits and should have broken up a really long time ago. And there are some people that will be staying together even though it's so difficult because they love each other and they just want to make it work and want to have the best lives together. And it's, yeah, again, relationships are complicated and messy. So I can see it both ways. But yeah, ball and chain is really coming into play here, isn't it?
Exactly right. So like, consider this, Prime. Let me test your paradigm. Okay. So we fast forward 100 years into the future. Sneaky and Prime's communist utopia has been realized. Okay. Material conditions no longer concern anyone because we're completely post-scarcity and everybody has everything they want because we've just organized society so brilliantly that, you know, that just happens to be the case. All right. Now, there is no incentive to stay with somebody for material conditions. You don't have to worry about your finances. You don't have to worry about housing. You don't have to worry about, you know, blah, 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 all good socialist things, right? So now you don't have this high barrier of exit based on your material conditions, do you? So would you still consider that we should put like a high barrier of exit on this? So there'd be like a penalty for exiting a marriage, right? Because you consider this barrier to be a good thing that actually promotes good relationships.
I'd say no. I'd say that the whole point of marriage is in order to deal with the fact that nature tries to kill you by taking your food and your water and your air, and it's hard to produce those things, and it's easier to produce those things in a family. And so the whole point of marriage is to make all of that junk easier. And if we could solve that in a socialist utopia, or probably I would hope not a socialist utopia,
whatever
some
it is,
kind of utopia, then yeah, there's no point for marriage. So we wouldn't need it anymore.
There we go.
The only utopia is socialist. Thank you.
Socialism is death.
Okay, let me see if I can answer this question, right? So you're saying all material needs are met, and that would necessarily include like the material needs of like children, right?
Everything is all sorted.
Yeah, all sorted. Would we need to set some sort of a high bar, some sort of like penalty for leaving, right?
Because like obviously if like there's no like actual like material downside to leaving a marriage because, you know, everything's a utopia, like you're under your premise of like this high barrier of exit is a good thing, would you impose a penalty for leaving a marriage?
I would not.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I guess I wouldn't. I see this is testing whether the pen is good or not, right? Like the walls are good and just, but I feel like, I mean, since we won't ever be hitting that utopia, so we won't be arriving anytime soon, right? That the part of the human condition is to always be to have your needs insufficiently met in some ways, right? Then I like okay. Let's talk about.
I know this. I'm asking you a moral question about like what do you value more? Like because like my query with this was I think people should be with people because they value the person and not for material.
No, I understand.
Like, for material reasons, right? So like if we take away material reasons as like a requisite, I'm trying to test your morals of what you value more importantly.
Yeah. No, I understand, and I get you. Like
being with somebody for the sake of being with them, or being with somebody.
Yeah.
So like that, it's a moral question. It's not like the real question. Like I know we're not going to have a utopia anytime soon.
Yeah. I'm thinking of like billionaires, right? Like people who are insanely wealthy, right? And who have, for all intents and purposes, have their material needs met. That like, does marriage provide them some sort of benefit, right? Beyond like a billionaire marrying another billionaire, right? But like in that context, like, would is marriage provide a benefit at all there? No?
Could make someone happy.
I don't think it does. No,
Really?
that's what I mean. Other than like this sort of like social status of being like, hey, look, here's a big party to say how much we love each other, which I'm not necessarily against, to be honest. But I think it's a bit odd that we do it in this like weird Christian fashion.
Okay.
Like there's no benefit there, is there? All right, you can have that party regardless. You don't need to. You don't need to have a marriage to be like, yeah, like we really love each other. Here's a party to celebrate that.
Okay, so yeah, what do you all think about that? Like, do you think for billionaires that the concept of marriage is actually even more of a detriment, right? But at the very least doesn't provide any benefits because their material needs are met.
Well, I think. Oh, sorry. You want to go? You can go.
You go ahead and go first.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I get it. We don't like billionaires, a lot of us, but I mean, they are human beings. They feel emotions to a degree. Obviously.
Debatable, but
Debatable,
okay.
but I think that you know, I'm sure most people have regular human emotions like the rest of us, unless you're like some weirdo that hangs around Jeffrey Epstein
Yeah, but what
and
are
has
our
no
regular human
and
emotions? though?
are like soulless. I think that like most people, even billionaires, probably will like grow up and want to fall in love with somebody. Now, of course, they usually kind of marry within their class, but that's partially just because that's who they're around, you know. But I don't think they always all the time do it for different benefits. I think that maybe I'm just too naive, but I'm sure they do it because they like somebody, and you know, the person makes them happy, and I would say that's a benefit.
Anyone else?
I feel like I missed the prompt. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So I was asking that in terms of billionaires, right? Because a Spoon had put up a situation where all material needs are met, and whether we should still have a penalty for people leaving a marriage. Then I asked, right, in terms of like people who are insanely wealthy, does marriage still provide some sort of benefit, right? So like the structure of marriage, does that? Yeah.
It doesn't. Like, I mean, it still provides these like social benefits of like, you know, like child rearing and like having a partner makes you live longer, you know, all this blah 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 stuff, right? But there's no like high barrier of exit there to discourage your relationship from ending. There's no like social stigma that you have to conform to because you're just above it, right? It's just like, fuck you. Like, I don't need to tell me what I do. I'm gonna go out and live on my yacht now. Like you're just so above it at that point that it makes no difference.
I think, yeah. I mean, personally, I don't really give a shit what billionaires do because they don't give a shit what anyone else does. They're just gonna do whatever they want to do, regardless. But a lot of them do seem to be married, and I don't know if that's just because they have, generally speaking, quite traditional views. You know, so
they got all the stability in the world.
Yeah, and I don't know.
But does it provide a benefit, do you think? Like, is there any reason, if you were insanely rich and your partner was also insanely rich, does it provide?
I think it could provide a benefit in their social standing, in that, again, that class of people can generally hold traditional views. So if they're married, then they probably look better to their friends. I don't know.
I don't even think it provides any benefit in terms of social standing. Like I said, like when you're like a billionaire, you are just like removed from society. Like you're so far above.
Yeah.
Everything. Like the reason like you or I, the reason like you or I conform to anything in like society, right, is because I need to exist within society, right? I need to live in a society, right? You're a billionaire, mate. You live on top of society. You live above society. You don't need to fucking conform to what anybody says, right? You can even break the law and get away with it. You can just fucking like sit up there on your fucking ivory tower. Like literally, you could buy an ivory tower and just fucking sit up there and do whatever the fuck you like. Like who the fuck? Like you don't need to conform to fucking anyone. You just fucking pay somebody off. You can fucking go live on a yacht. You can do whatever the fuck you like. You're above it all.
Maybe they get married to make people think they're not fucking children.
Wow.
Because they are.
I mean, look at Epstein. He was married, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, quite the
So-
take.
I'm sorry, I'm memeing at this point.
I think
Don't take
we've
that
seen-
seriously.
we've seen, especially I believe, just within like the last year or two, both Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates got divorced, right? I think there's something to say, and I believe both of them were actually married prior to, maybe not Bill Gates, but I know that Jeff Bezos was married to his wife prior to his business taking off. So I think it does depend on like the situation. Obviously, I think that if you are with somebody when they're making these, as far as like billionaires go, when you're making these like companies and investments and things like that, I do think there's something where you should be penalized as the person who's succeeding more, because like they have like usually like half their assets and things like that. But then I also think when you have people like Elon Musk, who's married to Grimes now, which they just got married, after he'd already been this, one of the most rich person in the world. I think that it just kind of depends on the situation. So, but I do think that there is a penalty for the billionaires by, again, I don't know if you mean this like from their wives taking their money, because it's still just like them, the rich people or whatever. But I do think there is some form of a penalty instituted there. But I think that
I don't think so. I think like if you've got like 50 billion and your wife takes like 25 billion, like you're still unbelievable. Like, it doesn't
Oh
matter.
yeah, oh yeah.
Like, it just
But
doesn't
that's
matter.
still, but
Doesn't make
that's
any
still
difference to
like
you.
in relativity, that's still a big. That'd be like obviously like it's
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like
scales
when you have
differently.
that much money, you're just above it all. When you have that much money,
Yeah.
though, you're just above it. It doesn't matter. Like having 1 billion or 20 billion makes no difference. Once you hit a billion, you've just got more money than you could just possibly do anything with. It just doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah, you could get divorced like 100 times
Yeah,
and still have more money than like
But it's
exactly.
still, I
most
mean,
people.
it's still a penalty though. Like I still understand.
Yes.
Like obviously, it's like you're
Yeah,
beyond the
it
scope
is.
of like the normal person, right? But like I think that applies to everything in that echelon of income. Like there's like nothing that really touches those people aside from this like percentages lost and gain, right?
Yeah. And those percentages don't really mean anything to those
Exactly.
people anyway. So it's just like, again, it's like a nothing. It's like not a downside even then.
Yeah. They're also like greedy fucking gremlins, so they probably would get upset over losing like a teeny tiny percentage. They probably still don't like it, even though
I
it's
heard
like
that-
the
Yeah.
smallest
I
little
heard
blip.
this I heard this interesting fact, right? And it's like, so Forbes estimated the amount of gold in Smaug's mountain, Smaug from Lord of the Rings, right?
Yes.
And like given the current value of gold, they estimated Smaug to be worth like 11 billion. So Jeff Bezos is literally worth more than a gold hoarding dragon.
It's not
That's
surprising.
awesome.
He's a fucking literal gold hoarding dragon, and he's like
Like a
20
fucking
times
gold hoarding dragon, motherfucker.
Okay.
richer.